Their older brother just came out of UMass and he owes $200,000. I can go into CNC operation and make a pretty nice little pay. And I got a brand new Ford F-150 out there.
And my grandfather used to tell me as a kid, if you want to compete with somebody, try to compete in their own backyard.
It doesn't get any better than that after 142 years. We're still maintaining that American manufacturing, that work ethic, that craftsmanship.
What we do here is vitally important to the country. It's not going away tomorrow.
We are the most vertically integrated factory in the world.
Welcome to Made in the USA, the podcast from Modern Machine Shop magazine that explores some of the biggest ideas shaping American manufacturing. I'm Brent Donaldson.
I'm Pete Zielinski. And Brent, you and I recently paid a visit to a plant where they are mass-producing micrometers.
Actually, that one plant was producing many different measurement tools, so why did micrometers stand out to you?
A micrometer is maybe the most signature tool for the work of a precision machinist. That is a specialist at making precision parts in metal through machining. Listeners who are not in manufacturing might not know this, but it does not take an electronic device to measure part details with units smaller than the eye can see. A micrometer is a C-shaped measuring tool with a fine, precise screw motion, gradients on the side. A machinist who knows how to use and read a mic, and you couldn't be a machinist without knowing how to do this, can measure part features accurately in thousandths of an inch. It is one of the most basic tools for precision manufacturing, but I never before thought of it as a thing that would also be precision manufactured. But in Athol, Massachusetts, we saw rows of the C-shaped frames being processed, outer surfaces being knurled and laser marked, and the spindles and anvils of micrometers being fine ground.
Yes, Athol, Massachusetts is a quintessentially New England town with a population of a little under 12,000. So Athol is the headquarters and primary manufacturing location for the LS Starrett Company, maker of, at last count, about 2,800 measurement products, most of them used in manufacturing. And 87% of those products are manufactured in Athol. Starrett is this show's sponsor for Season 2, but it's also a company that we wanted to cover as part of this season. We are telling different stories about companies that have made choices to locate manufacturing in the United States or keep manufacturing in the U.S., and Starrett fits that second category. While the company does not manufacture exclusively in the U.S., the majority of its production is here, and in fact, the majority of its production has remained in Massachusetts. And that has been true since the company was founded in 1880.
1880. A lot has happened since then. World wars, the Depression, inflation, the offshoring of manufacturing, and through it all, Starrett kept manufacturing here. We wanted to understand how and why that has been the case and what it has meant for the company, but first we'll take a look inside.
Specifically for our micrometers, its accuracy is all dependent on the thread. So it's called a micrometer spindle. So this spindle is started with a 12-foot piece of wire, 52-100 steel. We go ahead and machine it, angle it, thread it. From there, we'll do some heat treat to it. From there, we'll do some centerless grinding. What Kenny's doing is actually threading single point thread with a small little grinding wheel and grinding these threads. And this is a 40 pitch thread. So for every inch, there's 40 of those threads. And all that controls the 25 thousandths per revolution of a micrometer.
Because all of our tools are used by people that are working in oil or water-based coolant, it has to have a knurl on it so they can get a grip on the tool. Old man, I say old man Starrett, I mean that in the best possible way. He was very fussy about knurls. These guys would spend a day on these old Acme machines getting the knurl just right. He actually would come down and work on the machines himself to see how much of a project it was to get that knurl off the ground.
The voices you heard belong to Tim Cucci, product manager, and Jim Kunaholm, machine shop supervisor, respectively. And just an FYI here, Starrett's facility in Athol is ginormous, and during our visit over the course of 2 days, we conducted interviews in several different locations at the plant. Those range from nice, quiet offices to noisy production areas. The entire facility employs about 600 people, and indeed manufacturing at Starrett means manufacturing employment. long-term, skilled work done in many cases by people who grew up not far from this plant. Here is CEO Doug Starrett.
My background is I started here as a young man, I should say high school student, working in the plant in various positions. I can remember starting here, they called me an errand boy. Basically, I set up work for people in the plant. And, I joined the business in 1975, so I'm headed on 45 or so years. I'm fifth generation, and a lot of people, when they look at the history, it's interesting. Between the founder and my grandfather becoming president, there were two other presidents that ran the business, and Frank Ball and David Finley succeeded LS in 1922. And my grandfather was a mechanic. He started here when he was 14. Never went to graduate from high school, and he was quite skilled. They called them back in the day master mechanics that worked in the tool room. And that's how he came up. And he had a lot of inventive genius himself. He was responsible for a lot of the new product offerings from about 1940 through his death in 1962. And he was the one responsible for the international expansion.
Starrett, the company, got its start with founder L.S. Starrett's invention, the combination square. This is a tool you probably know. A metal rule slides through a slot in a straight edge held at a right angle. A thumb screw allows the rule to be secured at any position. Before this device was invented, carpenters, machinists, and others worked with squares that could not be adjusted.
Well, the business started in 1880 with Leroy Starrett. He invented the combination square, and that was really the thing that springboarded the company coming into business. It's interesting to note that, he was like a lot of industrialists at the time in the 1800s, grew up on a farm in Maine, in South China, Maine. And he learned a lot about machinery and equipment, obviously being on the farm, but he had to farm himself out early on to run farms in Newburyport, Massachusetts. The family got in a little bit of trouble. He was running farms for people that had quite a bit of money in Newburyport. He was quite successful in that endeavor. And during the winter, he was taking care of equipment, repairing equipment and so forth. In his spare time, he was tinkering, and he was always involved in inventions. In fact, I think at the time of his death, he had over 100 patents to his name, which was kind of an interesting fact about him. And he was looking for a place to start a business, and met a gentleman that knew of Athol, and he actually took a train out here and found this as a terrific place that he thought had skilled mechanics. It had water power, as you know what New England was like in those days, and a hotbed of ingenuity and invention was going on in the town. So that's where he really got his beginning. Well, the first tool, it was very simple. That he had invented a meat hasher. It was one of his first tools, and he looked at what the pattern makers were using for tools, and the idea on the combination square, everybody used fixed square blades, and he said, had the idea of having a sliding blade where a tool could be used. This is the first, they call it combination square for a reason. It is a tool that you can use for depth measurement, length measurement, squareness, angles. And he envisioned this becoming much more useful for the regular tradesmen, but also for the pattern makers.
The L.S. Starrett manufacturing facility in Athol today is a study in contrasts. It's an old facility, lots of hardwood, transoms over the office doors, complex layouts from various renovations and expansions, but it's the plant's production areas that are the continuous focus of improvement efforts.
My name's Matt Wells. I'm the Director of Operations in Continuous Improvement here at Starrett in Athol, Mass. responsible for all aspects of the manufacturing process, from environmental, health and safety, quality, production, and methods engineering. It really starts with being out on the floor, making yourself available to your team, listening to what they have to say, and then identifying some of those problems. So one area we've really been struggling with is in one of our machining departments. We're not getting enough throughput through that specific area in order to maximize our output in assembly and again, focus on our customers, which is getting our on-time delivery performance back to where it belongs, pre-COVID years.
Matt says the answer to this throughput challenge proved to be updating a set of fixtures on an automated machine.
So none of them, they're not big home runs. It's those little tiny opportunities, and you listen for those opportunities and take quick action on it. And just by changing that alone, it increased the throughput of that cell by 20%. With the level of experience that our operators have and working with our cross-training process of coupling a more junior employee with somebody who's a little more senior and kind of developing that buddy system, right? So they have an individual that they can go to if they're running into a problem. Because more than likely, because we have such a huge array of product, we might not have ran that job last week, but more than likely that 40-year veteran has seen that job 3 or 4 times throughout their career and has come across very similar challenges. When we talk about our gaps in succession planning and in getting people to come to the company and work for Starrett, right, and fill some of those critical roles, we've really taken a heavy focus on how do we eliminate some of the redundant work, things like polishing or very manual operations that don't require a high level necessarily of skill, but require somebody to be able to take action on and still do, right? So it's an essential part. It's a value add in our process, and we can't sell a tool without performing that operation at the end of the day. So it's not waste, but we have to look at opportunities to try to automate some of those, manual processes. And we have a lot of them out there. There's a lot of opportunity. So we have a team of individuals that we've currently work on, that they're internal Starrett employees, that their whole focus in life is how do we automate some of these manual processes. And really that starts with getting engaged with the team on the floor, understanding the challenges that they're faced with, but then utilizing their knowledge of the process to help implement some of these automation projects. And then we bring them along for the ride. So then instead of being the individual that's sitting there running a manual deburring operation, now they're learning how to load, unload, teach a robot, and it's developing their skill sets that we could then leverage into other areas within the organization. So it's really our strategy over the next 3 years is really how do we release direct labor? And that doesn't mean how do we get rid of direct labor. It means how do we redeploy that direct labor into other areas that require a higher level of skill? And how do we develop them and get them into those roles?
Part of how process improvement keeps advancing is through the attention of Starrett's Methods Group. This team is specifically tasked with finding opportunities in production for efficiency gain or for savings in time or scrap or cost, then making those changes happen.
And so, until I came to work for Starrett, I never heard the term methods, right? And that's not a common term. It's a little more in tune with process engineering or manufacturing engineering. So at the end of the day, for our methods group, it's really focusing on, like I had mentioned earlier, how do we identify opportunities to help our team work smarter, not harder, right? So it's really interfacing with the operators on the floor, providing that sounding board for them to identify where they're having a struggle, and for our team to focus on identifying opportunity improvements, whether that be a design change, a fixture change, adjusting speeds and feeds, maybe working with cross-training, making sure that our procedures are clearly documented. I mean, we have a lot of different ways that we can identify opportunity, whether that be through evaluating cost, and understanding, hey, what tools have the least margin that's available to them, and how can we identify where we could potentially reduce cost and improve the process. Part of that is scrap monitoring, as an example. Out on the floor, we do what we call our daily Gemba walks, right? Which is basically visualization of our factory on the floor. And it's really, focused on 5 key pillars, which is really, between safety, quality, delivery, inventory, and productivity. So that's an opportunity for us to interface with the floor and understand where the operators are having their struggles. And it identifies, clearly identifies, hey, if we're having a productivity related issue, going to see the process, going to understand the process, and understand from the operator's perspective where we can make improvements.
Here is methods engineer Sarah Fox.
In methods, some of what we do is lean the process. We look for process improvements to make it safer for the operator, to save money, to save lead time, to develop new products, to assist in that, to update blueprints, to just offer any support, really. If somebody flags me down in the shop and says, I'm having difficulty with this, is there any tooling, is there anything that I can do, or I have a quality issue, that would be our team here to address the quality issue, to see, do we need to rework this part? Is this part good as is? So yeah, it's a very, very broad, I feel like. And I think that's what makes it so enjoyable. It's somebody said, what is your job? I don't understand. I said, just imagine an emergency room for tools. That's what we do. We just want to solve the problem, help people out. It makes me really happy that in this job I get to help people out and make their job a little bit easier. That's what my goal is.
Continually improving manufacturing in this way, improving the way manufacturing is done in this plant, has been an alternative to sending it elsewhere. Here's CEO Doug Starrett.
I guess I never felt it wasn't the right thing to do. Believe me, I had enough people come in here and say, why are you continuing to do that? And we have morphed a little bit, but I think in our business, we are very vertically integrated. The outsourcing model, all right, is a pathway that many, many successful companies employ and do it quite well, all right? There are certain skills when you do that you lose in over a decade. You won't be able to bring back into the organization. 2, we tested the waters here. We outsource some machining in CNC work, mainly because if we got capacity constraints at any time, it makes good business sense to be able to have someone who you trust to make the product for you, where you're allowed, where you can handle capacity constraints, or if you're lucky enough, business grows faster than you can add capacity. You need to have somebody, and have sources. And we've cultivated people that have certain skills. Now, I will tell you, from a cost basis, we haven't found anybody to compete with us on costs, from machining costs. But people say, well, you can afford to pay higher costs because you don't have all the people costs internally. But at the end of the day, then you put yourself, you have less control in your businesses. Now you're putting your important piece of the business in someone else's hands, and you don't have as much control, maybe an insight of how their businesses are going and so forth. And you saw a lot of that happen during the pandemic. We had supply chain issues, and we had suppliers going out of business. I mean, we're still wrestling with some of that. But just think about the complexities that we've seen in the length of the supply chain. It sounds like a great idea. Let's go to China and then just move everything back here. We saw what happened during the pandemic. All right. And that's why I think there's some impetus to bring some things back, or at least to shorten the length of your supply chain. Years ago, we didn't do that. I mean, even businesses have made decisions to outsource. They usually outsource to somebody that's close to the plant, and that they could, stay on top of how they were doing as a business. Very hard to control that when you got sources and suppliers a long way away.
But of course, a generation ago, U.S. companies were sending manufacturing to China. Starrett went to China to sell them measuring tools.
In 1998, we made the decision, given the landscape that we saw what was going on in the U.S., that was the beginning of the dot-com era. There was the beginnings, and we could see it, beginnings of offshoring, some of our client base moving offshore. We felt it was important that we look at expanding into China. We were getting a lot of competition from China in those days. And I was responsible. I mean, I traveled extensively in Asia with the responsibility of where we're going to set up a greenfield site. And again, the philosophy was not to export what we're doing here. It was really to, my grandfather used to tell me as a kid, if you want to compete with somebody, try to compete in their own backyard, because you give them a little bit of a heartburn. So we decided to go to China, one, to capture the Chinese market.
Starrett does manufacture internationally. It's a company that has grown through expansion and acquisition over the decades into product lines beyond the handheld measuring devices we're focusing on in this episode. The company makes saw blades in Brazil. It makes optical systems in Scotland. It manufactures in other facilities in the U.S. For example, saw blades are also made in North Carolina, and stable granite structures for operations including semiconductor manufacturing are made in Minnesota. But the significant point is that the measuring tool manufacturing that began in Athol remained in Athol and continued thriving here. Among other things, that has affected people. Manufacturing in a location, staying in that place, makes the plant part of a community. Starrett has recruited a fair amount of its team, its talent, from the local neighborhood.
My name is Timothy Cucci, product manager for Precision Hand Tools at the Starrett Company, and I have been here for 27 years. I was raised here in Athol, Massachusetts, which is the headquarters of the Starrett Company. About a 10-minute walk from the company. I had a lot of family members who have worked here throughout the generations. Some still currently do. And I said I would never work in a factory. And of course, my mindset of a factory was the late 1800s, early 1900s during the Industrial Revolution. Dark, dirty, you're in a dungeon working long hours. No, I think I'm going to go to college, and being primarily raised by a single mother for the first chunk of my life. She was really pushing the college. Obviously, parents want their children to do better than they did. So I grew up here in Athol, graduated Athol High School in 1994. Typical kid, riding my bikes, bruising my knees when I fell off, fishing at the local pond, neighborhood wiffle ball games, football games, street hockey games, and ended up going to college for a year I went to Worcester State College, and I majored in psychology with a minor in Spanish. I've always had an interest in the human mind and why I think the way I think and why you think the way you think, and just the human species in general. So I was really in tune to that. And during my first summer break, I came to the Starrett Company. I remember this to this day. I was actually going to start working at a local pizza house that I had worked through all through high school, just to save some money for the summer to go back to school. And the day I was supposed to start at the pizza house, I got a call from the Starrett Company saying, "We have a job for you. Come in and interview, please." So I came to Starrett Company, interviewed, and I passed on the pizza house. And I started working nights during that summer of '95, welding carbide onto bandsaws, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. Being raised by a single mother. Of course, I had a stepdad that came in my teenage years, great guy. But I had no male influencer in my early stages, so I didn't know what tinkering in the garage was. I didn't know what tools were. So that's probably why my mind went to the more abstract thinking, the psychology aspect. And so they said, "Yeah, come on in." I had no idea what I was going to do here. Didn't even know what welding was. Didn't know what measuring tools were. So yes, they had to teach me a lot, and a lot I just picked up on my own. I'm very observationalist, if that is a word. I kind of, what I see, I can compute and keep in my memory bank and see it 2 or 3 times, and I usually have it down solid. So from that training, I was left on my own during nights. And yes, welding carbide on the bandsaws, that was a whole new life for me. And when I decided not to go back to school, I asked to get on the toolmakers program.
For Tim, the toolmakers program was not a good fit, but the change got him off the night shift and also exposed him to making micrometers.
So when I asked to get off the toolmakers program, I was happy I was on days. And they said, okay, so what do you want to do here? And I said, well, I spent some time in the micrometer department. I have some family in there. I feel comfortable knowing some people there. Can I learn what micrometers are? So from there, I went into the micrometer department. I started building basic micrometers at the first level. After about 3 to 4 years of that, we started creating manufacturing cells here at the Starrett Company. So this was the second assembly manufacturing cell created that I was asked to go into, which was really, a lean concept. I'm sure we're all aware of what that means. Everybody learns every step of the process. We did a little 5-piece flow. Flow was continually going. Work was inspected there, and it was a really great job. I raised a family. I raised my 2 daughters and my stepson in that cell, that micrometer assembly cell. But from there, after about maybe 4 to 5 years in there, I was asked to go into our special order micrometer department, where our special order micrometer department is basically if you see a tool in our catalog, but it's just not quite going to accomplish the application that you need, whether say you need an angle ground at a 45 degree opposed to our standard 60 degree, that would just come through our special order department. So a lot of tool modification in there. That was really fun, because after having been here close to 10 years at that point, maybe 8 years at that point, I understood tools. I understood how to use drills and taps and reamers. So from there, I really got to modify and create tools from the bottom up. When I introduce myself out of respect, I do not call myself an engineer for those that are degreed and had put the time into school. I understand that, and I do respect that title. So I will always say I was a methods engineer, or usually I say I was an engineering. So I got my education right here on the shop floor. But as well, I did go on to, I believe I have 10 or 11 different manufacturing certifications, everything from how to use Excel to GDT, geometric dimensioning tolerancing, and then even into product management, into finance, and LET leader education training, leader effectiveness training. So Starrett does support, if you're willing to continue education, whether it is to go to school, be degreed, or even just certifications, Starrett will support you in that. And I would say the opportunity is for yours for the taking. It all rests on your shoulders. What do you want out of life? What do you want out of your career? And I say that to everybody I come in contact here, the new hires, if I happen to meet some of them. Previously, I was hiring people in a training cell, and that was part of my process during my interviewing, is I would say, the door is wide open for you. And if you're happy running a machine, there's absolutely no judgment from me. If that's what you are happy with, you can spend 50 years here running a machine, knowing what you're going to do day in, day out, and be totally satisfied. If you want to build tools or assemble tools for the rest of your lifetime, great place to do that. If you want to work your way up here, no matter what avenue, whether it's engineering, whether it's in sales and marketing, whether it's even in purchasing and buying, whether it's in programming, most of our mid-level executives, for lack of a better word, management, originally came from the shop floor, and that still exists today. No, actually, could I share a quick story? I think that might tie this in. No, I think this might tie this in, and this just lives with me. So I want to make sure I get the story right. So 2019, visited Mount Airy down in North Carolina. I was doing some saw production. And first time I had been there, so they gave me a little tour, and I saw these welding machines. I said, hey, those are the 2 machines that I started on back in 1995, aren't they? Because they did move those down to Mount Airy. And that was another reason why I kind of went on the tool course too, because that job was going down south. All right, back to my story though. So I saw those machines there, and those are the machines I started on 95. It was like pretty cool. I just smiled. Not only that though, then I saw some micrometers that they had there, and some special micrometers that they had there to check the different angles of the tooth pitch or the width of the blade. And I was like, I used to build those tools. I used to build those special order tools that were specially modified to measure these tooth pitch. All at the same machine that I started on in 95. Hey, I used to engineer these tools to make them even better for application. And then I'm like, hey, now I'm the product manager of these tools. So January 2019, down in Mount Airy, my first time, I saw the 2 welding machines that I started on in 1995. And that was a full circle from welding to assembling micrometers, to modifying special micrometers, to engineering the micrometers, now to managing entire precision hand tools, micrometers obviously included.
That's nice.
That's a full circle of my story right there.
Here's another long-term Starrett employee, Scott Robinson.
Okay, so I started the Starrett Company in 1961. I was 11 years old, and basically in my day, back then, every kid had a paper route when they were 10 or 11. And I did. And there were 2 of us stationed at the Starrett Company.
It's not uncommon for loyal Starrett customers to call looking for a replacement part on a 70-year-old tool that is either still in use or has sentimental value. Scott is one of the Starrett employees who helps these people as a technical support manager.
Well, Athol is a really small town. We're Central Massachusetts is, we often think about trying to find a way to dig a moat between Worcester and Keene, New Hampshire, and then let that, that eastern part of the state just kind of float away. We really, and I'll tell you, I would bet you if you took a walk around the Athol, Orange, these small towns, and you asked how many people go to Boston, if you found 30 people, you'd be locked. Everybody out here has nothing, they don't want nothing to do with the city. We're country people. And that's what's helped, because people, they want to work close. They want to stay close. They don't want to travel hours to a job. And I think that's been a big boon to us right here. Granted, every single tool the Starrett Company makes is not made right in this building. But I would say 85 to 90% are. At least 90% are made right here. We are the most vertically integrated factory in the world. We work tightly with vocational schools in our area. We understand that our future is tied directly to young people coming into the business, and we work tightly. Franklin County Tech is down here in Turners Falls, Mass. Both Timmy and I are on the board down there. We've seen that. I think kids are, their older brother just came out of UMass and he owes $200,000. I can go into CNC operation and make a pretty nice little pay, and I got a brand new Ford F-150 out there. I think the country is slowly seeing that.
One more voice from Starrett. The audio sounds a little different here because we met Harry on the production floor.
Hello, my name is Harry Foster. I've been with the company 50 plus years. I am now the foreman of mass finishing and our polishing department. This they call a spiral pinion. And inside here, this spiral is what we're seeing makes the dial move. Now we're able to get in and have to get into that spiral inside that pinion to make that as smooth and as slippery as possible with incredible accuracy. Now everything that you see on this and everything that you're going to see down there goes through this room. Now some of this is brass, this is steel. One of the big challenges back then was to make this look uniform. And that's what I'm personally extremely proud of, is that through all of this testing, trial and error, that we not only cut costs, but we kept our product as good or better than what we had before consistently. to get the finishes. We all buy on Athol. We like the color of our shirts, our shoes, our cars. Our tools are no different. No, they're accurate, and that's a hands down that everybody accepts that and expects it. Quality. Athol.
Why is Starrett different? Why has manufacturing remained in one place for this company for so long? We heard a clue when we were interviewing. Here is Matt Wells again.
Yeah, that's our steam pipes. Yeah. It'll settle down here in a minute.
It's that old building. This led to an aside about air conditioning. The offices have been hot in the summer, we were told. Employees have memories of this. Company engineers, accountants, salespeople, and others who work in the office were used to making do. Why? Here's the point. Air conditioning the office portion of this old building, designed before air conditioning existed, was not a high priority, in part since it would only serve the offices. The people in the production areas handle small seasonal temperature fluctuations in the areas where they work, so shouldn't everybody? Manufacturing has remained because the company has always had the belief that manufacturing is what it does. If the company was mainly about sales and marketing or mainly about product development, that might change their focus or where the heart of the company is. They do each of these things, but the ongoing focus at the heart of the company is manufacturing. Here's Doug Starrett.
I don't know if you've looked at the founder's words, but he always, his base philosophy we always go back to is he could do no greater good than to create a business to provide employment and honest living for people. And we always keep that in mind because we've done that wherever we've gone in the world. I violently disagreed years ago, and we were trending toward a service economy, which scared me to death. I just think that, what we do here, even though we've seen some of our customer base erode, what we do here is vitally important to the country. It's not going away tomorrow. And today, coming out of the pandemic, who would ever have thought we would have a workforce shortage crisis across almost every sector of the business?
This workforce crisis today is the company's greatest challenge. Here again is Matt Wells.
Quite honestly, if you ask me what keeps me up at night, it's how do we continue to retain and recruit new employees into manufacturing and into our workforce.
But that manufacturing workforce is the hope, too. New entrants to manufacturing will mean new users and new markets for measuring tools. Starrett's continued commitment to manufacturing in the U.S. is, in some part, founded on the expectation that plenty of others will make the same commitment. Here's Doug Starrett one final time, followed by Tim Cucci, who briefly quotes him.
I told everybody, this is the longest term play that I ever made in my career is we want to make the brand younger and we want to put our brand and tools in the hands of young people coming up. And, if 1 out of 10 remembers us and wants to, gets in a position of authority in other businesses, maybe they'll think of Starrett and what we can provide for them in terms of improving their operations and so forth. So I think it's important for the trading, but I also think it's important for the company.
Just like I think Doug's famous line, and I'm sure he used it. We're in a great place. Things that get made need to be measured, and we make measuring tools. I love the United States of America. We have our faults. We're all human, just like any and everybody else in every country. But America, you have that opportunity to become anything you want. Same at the Starrett Company. So I tie that into American manufacturing. And what that means to me, and what that means to Starrett Company, founded 1880 right here in Athol, Massachusetts. Leroy Starrett invented the first combination square blade. And from there, he took off to 3,500 precision measuring tools. And now we're down to maybe about 2,800 precision measuring tools. And out of those 2,800 precision measuring tools, 87% of those are made right here in Athol, Massachusetts, right where this company was founded. It doesn't get any better than that. After 142 years, we're still maintaining that American manufacturing, that work ethic, that craftsmanship, the quality, the pride, everything we've touched on. So the heart and soul of the Starrett Company is in Athol, Massachusetts. American manufacturer. You see all the U.S. flags we have out. We have Made in America literature brochure. Throw in a little plug if you don't mind. About a year and a half ago, I launched or went to market with our most popular micrometer, our 436.1 series of outside micrometers, where I send our frames out to a company in Texas. I keep it here in the United States where they do a hydrographic dip liquid print. I'll give you a shout out. Where there's an American theme print. There's an eagle and a flag, and how cool is it to have a micrometer in your hand that has the American theme and pride on there, the flag, the stripes, the stars, and all that's done right here in the United States of America. It doesn't get any better than that.
Boy, you should have stayed back home.
Made in the USA is a production of Modern Machine Shop and published by Gardner Business Media. The series is written and produced by Peter Zielinski and by me. I mix and edit the show. Pete also appears in our sister podcast all about 3D printing or additive manufacturing. Find AM Radio wherever you get your podcasts. Our outro theme song is by The Hiders. So if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a nice review. If you have comments or questions, email us at madeintheusa@gardnerweb.com or check us out at mmsonline.com/madeintheusa podcast.